My name is Ava Caldwell, and on the last Thursday of March, I buried my husband. Ethan wasn't just my husband. He was my anchor, my partner in every storm, my safe place. We had been together since college, married for 9 years, and raising our son, Oliver, in a home we had built on love and laughter. But all of that was torn away from me in a heartbeat. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind that soaks into your skin and makes everything feel heavier. Ethan had kissed me on the forehead that morning and said he'd be back in 20 minutes, just a quick run to pick up milk and some fruit. I was folding laundry when the doorbell rang. 2 police officers stood there, hats in their hands, with looks that told me everything before a word left their mouths. There are no words for the kind of silence that follows news like that. Just static in your ears, a drop in your chest, and then your whole world collapsing inward. I moved through the following days like a ghost. I planned the funeral. I picked out a casket. I arranged for Ethan's favorite jazz pianist to play someone to watch over me. I tried to stay strong for Oliver, who kept asking when Daddy would come home. But nothing prepared me for what happened the day of the funeral. The chapel was filled with people who loved Ethan. Old friends, colleagues, neighbors who brought us casseroles and sympathy. My mother sat with her arm around me, whispering reassurances. And there I was, in a black dress Ethan always said made me look like I ruled the world. I wore it that day not for beauty, but for battle. Because deep down, I had a gut feeling they would come. And I was right. Judith and Charles Caldwell, Ethan's parents, entered the chapel 20 minutes late, loud enough to be heard over the quiet organ music, their expensive shoes echoing like a warning shot. They hadn't called, hadn't sent flowers, hadn't even acknowledged that their son was gone. And yet, they strolled in like honored guests. Judith wore a pearl necklace and an expression of carefully curated sorrow. Charles gave curt nods like he was attending a corporate event, not his son's funeral. My hands clenched around Ethan's photo, my knuckles turning white. I thought they would slip quietly into the back, that they would at least show some humility. But no, they brushed past everyone and took their places in the front row, as if they had any right. Judith looked around and muttered something about the arrangements being understated. Charles asked a cousin if the reception would have valet parking. I could feel eyes shift from me to them, guests looking confused, even uncomfortable. Everyone knew the history. Everyone knew that for years, Ethan's parents had pretended our marriage didn't exist, that they always favored Marcus, Ethan's older brother, the one who bounced from failed startup to failed marriage, the golden boy who could do no wrong. Ethan, on the other hand, was too humble, too independent, too kind. And for that, they treated him like an outsider in his own family. I remembered how they didn't come to our wedding, how they made up an excuse about a cruise, then posted photos from a beachside resort. They missed Oliver's birth. They skipped every birthday party. And now they dared to walk into my husband's funeral like they were mourning parents? I kept my jaw clenched, tears burning at the corners of my eyes. Not just grief, but fury. This wasn't about them. This was about the man I loved. About the life we built. About the goodbye he deserved. I should have stood up. Should have told them to leave. But I didn't want to create a scene. Not yet. I told myself to breathe. That they would be gone soon. That this day wasn't about revenge. But I was wrong. Because that was only the beginning. And they didn't come just to grieve. They came for something else. The funeral ended with Ethan's favorite song echoing through the chapel. And as people stood to leave, I felt like I had survived a storm with my body intact, but my soul shredded. Guests came up to me one by one, offering hugs, shared tears, and quiet words about what a remarkable man Ethan had been. I smiled politely, nodded, thanked them for their kindness, even though I was barely holding it together. Meanwhile, Judith and Charles stayed glued to the front pew, like they were waiting for the credits to roll after a play. Charles checked his watch, looking bored. Judith kept dabbing her dry cheeks with an embroidered handkerchief. Not once did either of them approach Oliver or me. After the final guests trickled out, I walked over to the casket with my son, placed a single white lily on it, and whispered, "You were everything they never deserved." Oliver clung to my waist, sensing the finality. I didn't think I had anything left to give emotionally. That's when they approached. Judith's heels clicked sharply against the marble floor as she stepped up beside me. Her lips twisted into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ava, dear," she began. "Such a tasteful service. Very modest." I didn't answer. "And that music," Ethan always did like those odd old songs, Charles added flatly, as if Ethan were a difficult employee they had to tolerate. I turned to them, trying to stay calm. Thank you for coming, I said stiffly. Judith waved a hand as if brushing away dust. Of course. We had to say goodbye. He was our son, after all. My heart snapped. After all? Now they claimed him? After years of avoiding us, of ignoring Oliver, of mocking Ethan's choices? Then, without a trace of shame, Charles cleared his throat and said the sentence that would flip everything upside down. Now that things are settled, we'd like to talk about the house. I blinked. The house. Yes, Judith chimed in smoothly. Technically, Ethan bought it with part of the Caldwell family trust, which means, legally, it might fall under shared family assets. Marcus is also entitled to it. I didn't hear the rest. I felt the air sucked from the room as my brain tried to process their cruelty. This wasn't a misstep. This wasn't grief. This was calculated. They had come to the funeral not to honor their son, not to comfort their daughter-in-law or grandson, but to claim something, to stake a legal and emotional flag on the ashes of the man they neglected in life. You didn't even call when he died, I said quietly, my voice trembling. You didn't send a card. You didn't check on Oliver. But you're here now, talking about property? Charles gave a shrug. We were processing. Everyone grieves differently. Judith nodded. And besides, this isn't personal, Ava. It's just logistics. Logistics. That word made me snap. I stepped closer, my hands shaking with rage. Logistics? Let me be perfectly clear. You didn't just lose your son. You threw him away years ago. He gave up trying to earn your approval long before Oliver was even born. And now that he's gone, you think you can swoop in like royalty and take over his legacy? Judith's eyes narrowed. We just want what's fair. You don't get fairness, I said. Not after what you did. Not after the decades you spent pretending he didn't exist because he didn't live up to your precious Marcus. They started to protest, but I raised a hand. No. This conversation is over. If you want to try something legally, be my guest. But I promise you, Ethan made sure his will was airtight. And so am I. With that, I turned and walked out, holding Oliver's hand, never looking back. But that wasn't the last I heard from them. They weren't done. And what they tried next? It would make the funeral look like a warm-up. A week after the funeral, just as I was beginning to breathe again without sobbing, a large envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, just my name scrawled in stiff cursive. Inside was a copy of a letter from a law firm. Judith and Charles were formally contesting Ethan's will. They were arguing that Ethan had been mentally unwell when he made his final estate changes, that he'd been coerced by his spouse under duress, that he had neglected his filial duty to his brother Marcus. I couldn't believe it. They were trying to rewrite history, erase years of distance they created, all because I supposedly poisoned Ethan's mind against his family. They painted me as a manipulative gold digger who isolated their precious son and cut him off from his rightful legacy. According to them, I was the villain who drove a wedge between Ethan and his brother. Ethan hadn't spoken to Marcus in over a decade. Marcus, the golden child who once tried to scam Ethan out of his startup funds and called him a soft-hearted failure. The same Marcus who crashed our engagement party drunk and demanded Ethan invest in his business, which turned out to be a gambling app he coded with a high school friend. But to his parents? He was a misunderstood genius, and I was the wicked witch who stole their son's loyalty. At first, I laughed. I wanted to believe it was just a desperate ploy, something they'd drop once they realized how airtight Ethan's will really was. But then they served me court papers. They were actually going to court over this. My grief, already raw and open, was being dragged into a legal battlefield by the very people who never once showed my husband real love while he was alive. I met with our lawyer, Ethan's trusted friend, Daniel, and handed him everything. The will, the letters, the voicemail Ethan had recorded just a month before he passed, saying how relieved he was that his parents had no access to Oliver. It was like listening to his ghost explain to the world what I already knew in my heart. They don't deserve any part of what we built, Ethan had said. Promise me, Ava. Promise me you'll keep Oliver away from that toxicity. And I had. But now they were trying to claw their way back in, not because they missed their grandson, not because they felt guilty, but because they wanted control. The house, the accounts, even sentimental things like Ethan's guitar collection, they listed everything in the paperwork. Judith even requested a family heirloom ring that Ethan had gifted me when we first moved in together. She called it an item of historical significance. It was sickening. But here's the twist I hadn't seen coming. They weren't just fighting me legally. They were spreading lies. Within days, their version of events made its way to social media. Judith, of course, didn't post herself. But suddenly, there were vague, concerned comments under Ethan's obituary post. Things like, "Strange how he cut off his whole family after getting married. Some people isolate you from those who love you the most. Shame his real family wasn't even allowed near him before the end." It was clear where it was coming from. Friends started calling me in confusion. Some of Ethan's old colleagues reached out with cautious sympathy, unsure what to believe. I was being publicly slandered in the middle of mourning. And the worst part? Oliver was starting to ask questions. He saw one of the comments by accident when looking up a photo from the funeral on my phone. His little voice asked, "Mom, did Daddy stop loving Grandma and Grandpa?" I knelt down and said, "No, sweetheart. Daddy just had to love them from far away because they hurt him too much up close." But inside, I was burning. They wanted a war? They just got one. I was done playing polite. Done giving them grace they never earned. The next morning, I called Daniel, our lawyer, and said, "Let's go on the offensive." If they wanted to drag Ethan's name through the mud and paint me as some manipulative widow, they were going to face the truth head-on. We gathered everything. Every text, every email, every voicemail Ethan ever saved that showed his relationship with his parents and Marcus for what it really was: cold, conditional, and laced with resentment. There were messages from Judith saying things like, "Don't bother coming if you're bringing her," referring to me. Or Charles writing, "It's not too late to find someone who'll elevate your name, not someone who holds you back." But the crown jewel? A video. A shaky phone recording Ethan took 2 years before he died. He'd just come back from a disastrous meeting with his parents. In it, he looked exhausted but calm. "They asked me to change my will," he said to the camera. "Said I should give something to Marcus because he's struggling and it's what brothers do." I told them no. I told them I'm not going to reward manipulation just because we share blood. If anything ever happens to me, I want it on record. I chose Ava and Oliver. No one else. That clip, timestamped and backed up to cloud storage, became our anchor. I sent it to the court with a sworn affidavit. And then I did something I never imagined I'd do. I posted it. Not out of pettiness. Out of necessity. The moment I hit publish on that video, everything shifted. Thousands of people, friends, strangers, even some distant relatives, saw the truth. Saw Ethan in his own words, laying bare the emotional estrangement he'd endured. The lies Judith and Charles had whispered into the world were silenced by one powerful voice, his. The backlash against them was immediate. Judith deactivated her social media accounts within hours. Marcus made a half-hearted post claiming the video was taken out of context, but no one bought it. And as for Charles, he tried to threaten legal action for defamation until Daniel calmly reminded him he was threatening a dead man's testimony on public record. The court hearing? It lasted less than an hour. The judge, after reviewing the video, called their claim a grotesque abuse of probate procedures driven by entitlement, not justice. The case was dismissed. They were ordered to pay my legal fees. But it didn't end there. That same week, I received a handwritten letter in the mail. No envelope, just a folded piece of paper left outside my front door in the rain. It was from Judith. "You win," it read. "But know that Oliver will grow up one day and ask why you kept him from us. And when he does, you'll have to live with your lies." I crumpled the letter and threw it in the fireplace. Because here's the truth. I'm not keeping Oliver from his grandparents. I'm protecting him from people who only show up when there's something to take. He'll grow up with memories of laughter, love, and peace, not guilt, manipulation, and conditional affection. And when he's old enough to ask questions, I'll show him the video. I'll let Ethan speak for himself, because he always knew the weight of silence and the power of truth. After the court's final decision, you'd think things would settle, right? They didn't. Judith and Charles may have lost their legal case, but their bitterness didn't fade, it curdled. They started sending letters to old family friends, colleagues of Ethan's, even my neighbors. Whisper campaigns. She brainwashed him. She turned him against his family. She's trying to erase us from Oliver's life. But the thing about truth is it has roots. People saw the evidence. The messages. The video. They remembered how Ethan had always seemed emotionally distant around his parents, even at large family events. How Judith never once smiled in a photo where I stood beside him. How Charles never addressed me directly unless it was to correct me or question a decision. Eventually, the noise faded. People stopped responding. They saw the desperation for what it was, a dying grasp for control. And in the quiet that followed, I started to breathe again. Not just shallow, survival breaths, but deep, full, freeing ones. I redecorated our home, not to erase Ethan, but to make space for the new chapter. I kept his reading chair by the window, his favorite records, the photo of him holding newborn Oliver, tears streaming down his cheeks. But I also put up new art, new light, new energy. Oliver, too, was healing. We started going on walks after school. He'd talk about bugs and math and which superhero would win in a fight. He didn't ask much about the court stuff, only once, softly, "Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at me?" I knelt down, looked him in the eye, and said, "No, sweetheart. They're confused and hurt. But that has nothing to do with you. You are loved. You are safe. And we'll always make sure of that." His smile told me it landed. One day, while sorting through storage, I found a sealed envelope with Ethan's handwriting. It had my name on it, and the words, "just in case." My heart pounded as I opened it. Inside was a letter written months before his death. "Ava, if you're reading this, something happened I couldn't stop. But I need you to know, I never doubted you. Not for a second. You made me stronger, softer, better. If my parents try anything, stand tall. Protect Oliver. And know I trusted you with everything because I love you beyond this life. You were the best decision I ever made. Love, Ethan." I clutched the letter to my chest and wept. Not out of sadness, but out of clarity. He had known this day might come, and he trusted me to carry the truth forward. I framed that letter. It hangs in Oliver's room, next to the shelf of superhero figurines. Because in our house, real heroes don't wear capes. They leave love behind like a map through the fire. Months passed. The seasons changed. And with them, so did I. I stopped looking over my shoulder. I stopped waiting for Judith's next move. Instead, I focused on building a life Ethan would have been proud of. Oliver started 3rd grade, joined a science club, and even made his first best friend, a boy named Marcus who had the same obsession with space and dinosaurs. They were inseparable. I found part-time work again. It was hard balancing single motherhood and grief, but I welcomed the distraction. I felt capable, grounded, even joyful on some days. And then came the knock. I was baking cookies with Oliver when the doorbell rang. My stomach twisted. Through the peephole, I saw Charles. Alone. He looked older, not just in years, but in wear. Like life had peeled back the armor of control and left behind a man who didn't quite know who he was anymore. I didn't open the door at first. Then I heard his voice, low, almost broken. "Ava, please. Just 5 minutes." I cracked it open. He didn't try to push through. Didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, eyes wet. "I came to say sorry." I didn't answer. He went on. "I was wrong. We were both wrong. I thought I was protecting Ethan's legacy by taking Oliver. But I see now the real legacy was in how you loved him, and how you're raising our grandson." His voice caught. I miss my son." And for the first time, I didn't feel rage. I felt sorrow. I nodded slowly. "I miss him too." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped box. "For Oliver, if you'll allow it." I took it cautiously. "I won't bother you again," he added. "I just wanted to try and do one thing right." And then he walked away. Inside the box was a photo of Ethan, maybe 6 years old, holding Charles's hand at a beach. On the back, scribbled in Ethan's handwriting, was, "My hero. My dad." It hit me like a punch to the ribs. Even good men can lose themselves. Even good fathers can become shadows of who they were. But maybe, just maybe, they can also find their way back to humanity. I didn't invite Charles back into our lives that day. But I didn't slam the door either. Because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It just means choosing not to let someone else's darkness control your light anymore. Just when I thought the dust had settled, life tossed another storm at my doorstep. I was folding laundry one rainy Thursday afternoon when I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer. But some gut instinct, made me pick up. "Ava," said the voice on the line, cold and calculated, "we need to talk." "I'm in town." "Judith." I froze, like ice had replaced the blood in my veins. "What could you possibly have to say to me?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. "I want to meet Oliver," she replied bluntly. "I've had time to reflect. He's my grandson. I deserve to see him." My heart dropped. This woman, who tried to steal him from me in my darkest hour, now had the audacity to ask for a visit? "No," I said firmly. "You don't get to walk back in like nothing happened." "You don't own him," she snapped. "And you don't either," I bit back. "You buried your son, then tried to erase his wife and child from memory. That's not what a grandmother does." There was silence. Then a long, slow sigh. "You'll regret keeping him from me," she said. I didn't answer. I hung up, but the anxiety settled in like fog. Thick, unshakable. I started checking the locks twice, leaving a light on at night, watching Oliver closer at the park. And then one evening, as we were heading to the car after piano lessons, I saw her, Judith, sitting in a sleek black car across the street, watching us, not waving, not moving, just staring. I froze, shielding Oliver instinctively. She didn't get out. She simply started the engine and drove off. That was when I knew this wasn't over. She hadn't come for a conversation. She came to plant a seed, to remind me that she still believed she had power. But I wasn't that broken widow anymore. I was a mother who had walked through fire. And if she thought I'd let her close to my son again, she had no idea how far I'd go to protect him. The next few weeks felt like walking across a minefield. I kept waiting for another call, another sighting, another unwanted visit. But nothing came. Silence. An eerie calm. Until one morning, I opened the mailbox to find an envelope with no return address. Inside, a formal letter from Judith's lawyer. She was filing for grandparental visitation rights. My hands trembled. After everything she'd done, after trying to strip my son from me in the middle of my husband's funeral, she still believed she had a claim on him? I called my attorney, furious. "Can she actually do this?" "Anyone can file," he replied. "But she has no legal ground. The courts will want proof that it's in Oliver's best interest. And considering her past behavior, we have plenty to fight back." Still, the thought of Oliver being dragged into court, into rooms full of people arguing over him, it made me sick. So I decided to end it differently. I reached out. One final message to Judith: withdraw the petition, or I'll open everything to the public. What you did, what you said, every attempt to erase your son's legacy. I have witnesses. I have evidence. And I have absolutely nothing to lose when it comes to protecting Oliver. 2 days later, the lawyer called me again. She dropped the case. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just a quiet, legal retreat. And for once, that was enough. I looked at Oliver that night, curled up on the couch with a blanket, watching cartoons with jelly on his chin, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because the threats were gone, but because I'd faced them. I had fought for my son, for my dignity, for the truth, and I'd won. Life doesn't hand you justice in neat packages. Sometimes it leaves you to build it yourself, brick by painful brick. But if you keep going, if you hold the line for what's right, eventually, the past can no longer touch you. Not even from across the street, not even with a lawyer, and not even with blood ties.